Hello and welcome to Doing Business in Asia, a series that looks at the challenges and opportunities of doing business in the world's fastest growing economic region. In this programme, we're going to look at the economic prospects for Asia. In other programmes, we'll look at subjects such as the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, about the talent challenge, about retaining staff, particularly in China, and about managing HQ's expectations for the region. These programmes are meant to offer practical advice to help you run your business. We very much hope you'll enjoy them. The outlook for Asia's economies is dependent greatly on the outlook for the American economy, because Asia trades so much with the rest of the world and particularly with the US. And the outlook for the US in 2007 is not particularly bright. If you look at this chart, which comes from the middle of 2006, you can see the effect of house prices falling in the US, and house prices dropped away very quickly. Add to that the higher oil prices and higher interest rates which American consumers experienced in 2006, and they're likely to be much less confident in their spending throughout 2007. That means they'd likely to demand less goods from Asia, and so the growth rate in Asia will fall too. If you look across the world, our expectation is that world economic growth will slow throughout 2007, and particularly in the US. But in Asia, the economies are much more robust. They have to import a great deal of commodities from other places, they trade much more with each other, and there's a growing local consumption. So Asian economies are likely to remain some of the fastest growing in the world. In fact, if you look at the region as a whole, every economy in Asia is expected to grow much faster than the world average in 2007, with the exception of Japan. And even Japanese growth is likely to be much greater than it was in the 1990s. If you're going to be anywhere in the world, then Asia is the place to be. China is probably the most exciting economy in the world. 1.3 billion people, 10% growth in 2005, 10% growth in 2006, and probably something close to 10% growth in 2007. It is easily the world's fastest growing major economy. Inflation is low and investment is flooding into the place. The prospects for China in terms of the economics are certainly very good. And our forecasts are for 2007, 2008 that China will continue to be one of the most attractive countries in the world in terms of its economics. Does that mean that we should all be very comfortable about China? No. China's economy may be growing very quickly, but it's also built up a number of discontinuities. There's a number of issues that certainly are of big concern to us. The first of those is the banking sector. The banks may be attracting lots of money from IPOs and from inward investors, but the banks remain very weak, and the amount of lending they've been pushing into the economy is a big concern. There's also the problem with the discontinuities between the eastern regions of China and the west. The number of civil disturbances in China has risen dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years. There's the problems with the threat of trade barriers from the US and from Europe. And there's all sorts of other issues to do with house price bubbles in Shanghai, about overcapacity in many industries, that lead us to worry about the future for China. China's growth will not be like some hockey stick forever upwards into the future. There will be ups and downs in China's growth. Predicting when those come is the difficult thing. So when you're doing business in China, feel confident that the growth will be there over the long term. But remember too that risk and return are usually very closely matched. To look at the outlook for India and Southeast Asia, let's now go over to Justin Wood in Singapore.
So what's happening in India? Well, I think for foreign multinational companies looking at India, there are really two parts to the story there. The first part is the economy and the really very impressive rates of growth that the economy's been recording recently. Look at 2006, growth of about 7.5%. 2007, very similar rate of growth, about 7.5%. What's driving this growth? Well, there are several things. The services sector, the largest part of the Indian economy, is doing very nicely. In particular, the business process outsourcing and the IT services sector that we hear so much about. But also consumption. India is very much in the middle of a consumption-driven boom at the moment, largely based around the emergence of a new urban middle class. So lots of very, very nice growth coming out of India. That's the first part of the story. The second part of the story for foreign multinationals is how do you capture a piece of that growth? And here I think it's proved very, very frustrating for foreign companies. They look at India, see all the great growth, want a piece of it, but are reluctant to put their money in and have been unable to put their money in. Why is that? Well, there are several reasons. First of all, I think infrastructure. The infrastructure in India has been poorly underinvested in for many, many years now. Roads, railways, ports, airports, power stations, all desperately in need of investment. That's holding companies back. Second, business climate. Things like the draconian labour laws, the bureaucracy, the regulations. This is all hampering the investments of foreign companies moving into India. Third, investment caps. If you look at sectors like financial services, retail, even telecoms, a lot of these companies are actually still prevented from putting their money into India. So all of this, a very big barrier for foreign multinationals looking at India. And if you look at this chart here, this shows foreign direct investment going into various parts of Asia. You can see China at the top there, running away. Clearly, they're pulling in the most investment in the region. In the middle, ASEAN doing very nicely. But the laggard in the picture clearly is India at the bottom, pulling in almost no FDI. Now, there is a little bit of progress. They are spending more on infrastructure now. They are looking to reform the business climate, but progress is slow, and it's likely to remain slow. So let's turn our attention now to Southeast Asia and the ASEAN region. What's the story there? Well, I think on the whole, the picture is very positive. We're looking at growth in 2006 of around 5.5%, similar rate of growth for 2007, and indeed going forwards. Now, it's not as exciting as China, and it's not as exciting as India, but I think that 5.5% is still very decent growth in most people's books, and it's still well above the average world growth rate. What's driving this growth? Well, take a look at this chart here, which shows exports coming out of the ASEAN region. As you know, we've had very strong global demand in recent years, and ASEAN has benefited hugely from that demand. You can see exports have been growing very, very sharply. Grew by about 16% in 2005, 15% in 2006, looking for very similar growth rates in 2007. So exports, very, very strong part of the ASEAN growth story. But they're not the only part. Many other sectors of the economy are also doing very nicely. In particular, tourism is growing. Retail in places like Indonesia and Vietnam. Business process outsourcing, financial services, all doing very well. And consequently, because of all this growth, we're seeing a lot of foreign direct investment come into the region. If you look at this chart here, I showed you it's the same chart we saw during the India segment. It shows foreign direct investment coming into various parts of Asia. China, as you know, at the top, India at the bottom, and ASEAN in the middle. You can see that FDI has been growing very, very nicely. And indeed, in 2005, foreign direct investment hit record levels in the ASEAN region at $38 billion. And we believe that the FDI will continue to flow into the region. So economically, all very positive. But that's not to say that there aren't some very serious risks in the region. And top of our list certainly is political risks. You all know about the coup in Thailand in 2006. But there are shaky politics elsewhere in the region too, not the least in the Philippines, Malaysia, other places. So there are lots of risks that companies need to consider when they're investing in this part of the world. But if these countries can avoid and steer around some of these risks, then we think the outlook is very positive and growth is likely to continue.
So there you are, the outlook for Asia's economies. And pretty bright it is too. The world's fastest growing region. Every economy in Asia growing faster than the world average, with the exception of Japan, and even Japanese growth better than for many, many years. China, 10% growth in 2006, slightly less in 2007, but still one of the fastest growing economies of the world. There are risks, of course, but China is still the biggest draw for all investment in the region. India, also very fast growing, and in some areas a very attractive market for investment. But so far, despite everybody looking at India, not many people have brought their wallets. And Southeast Asia, again, very fast growth, lots of opportunities, but the biggest message there is watch for the political risks. Southeast Asia is less stable than it's been for a number of years. And if you're running a business in the region, what should you be thinking about? Well, because you're at the centre of the fastest economic growth, and growth is slowing in the US and Europe, there's really one thing you should be thinking about. Prepare to be relied upon, because every other part of the world is going to be looking for you to make up the growth shortfall. We hope you've enjoyed the first of these programs. The next program is going to look at the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. We're going to talk to companies who are developing and targeting products at the hundreds of millions of people in India and China who appear to have no money to spend. How do you tackle this market? What sort of products you require? And what are the expectations? In the meantime, if you've got any feedback, please contact me at the office in Hong Kong or Justin in Singapore. We do look forward to hearing about what you think. Thank you.